Alrighty. Hey guys, I wanted to do a comparison video on some different popular grips for mice. So this is my Fantech Aria, which has the Pro grips on it. If you're not familiar with those particular grips, or if you're curious why these are being used, they're basically the same, even down to the texturing on the grips themselves, as the BTL version 2 grips, which I've previously used on my Outset and NP01, as well as my white Comb Pro Air, and I've enjoyed them quite a lot. So these are kind of my control group for my current favorite model of grip. And then on this G305, I went ahead and picked up some Corepad grips because I hadn't tried them before, and I wanted to see how they compare. So this will be, to start off, a bit of an initial impressions, as well as some description of how they differed in applying the grips, and what that process was like. So between the two, I think I'm just going to call them the BTL grips. These are a little bit spongier. No, they're not significantly spongier in the thicker parts, but they feel a little bit bulkier, I guess, is a better description. I think they're slightly thicker, but it's a little bit hard to tell because the Corepad grips have this edging that's a thinner material than the textured grip areas. Overall, I would say, in terms of my initial impressions of the two grips, I don't quite feel the sculpture and curvature of this thumb divot as cleanly inside the Aria, for example, as I do the convex tapering of the side of the G305. So between them, if you want a mouse which preserves, or if you want grips which help preserve the shape of the mouse, because you've taken the time to find a mouse that you like the shape of, I think Corepads are probably a better option, at least as an initial impression. In terms of the grippiness of them at the moment, I think the Corepads have a little bit better traction, um, although they don't necessarily feel grippier intuitively. It's much harder to drag my finger backwards and forwards on the Corepad grip compared to the BTLs. So that gives me the impression of them having a higher level of grip. And that could also be contributing to my tendency to not grip them as tightly when using them initially. Because if they're grippier, then I don't have to create as much force pushing into them to get the required level of friction to properly control the mouse. So yeah, initial impressions seems to go, kind of functionally speaking, in favor of the Corepad grips. And I think most people would also find that the Corepads are a little bit easier to apply to the mouse in question. The reason that I bring this up is, again, because they have this surrounding piece, which doesn't include the thicker textured portion. What I find is that when applying the Corepad grips, they're a little bit easier to kind of stretch or form to the shape of the mouse. They definitely feel more flexible when applying them, and the adhesive seems a little bit easier to remove and reapply without a significant change in the overall level of adhesion to the mouse shell. If you are dealing with a mouse with kind of a difficult shape with more sculpture to it, the Corepad grips would probably be a better option in that way. Because the BTL grip has a little bit more structure to it, it's a little bit less flexible. It can make it a slightly easier to line up along a seam of the mouse when applying it, and to try and keep the application kind of, in line with the intended original geometry. So it's kind of a trade-off. Would you rather have something that is a little bit easier to get, nicely aligned with one specific edge, or would you rather have a more pliable grip that you can try and sort of stretch and mold a little bit more to how you think you want it to fit on the mouse? Overall, I don't know that there's a clear winner in terms of which one's easier to work with and apply to the mouse. Definitely, I would say overall the Corepad grips took a little bit longer to get applied and situated, but now that they are on, I think I'm a bit happier with how they turned out overall. I do also like having this thinner lip around the edge of the grip because there's less of a lip to be kind of picked up or scratched at by you know fingers or rubbing on various objects. So if I were going to say use one of these mice as a travel mouse and throw it in a laptop bag and stuff, then I think the Corepad grips probably have a little bit better chance of surviving in that environment. I don't think either of them is particularly um, invincible. I don't think if you treat any mouse as a travel mouse and constantly just throw it in a laptop bag, that the grips are going to hold up all that well for that long of a period of time. But if I were picking between these two, I think the Corepad grips are probably a slightly better option. So yeah, that's my initial thoughts about these two grips. I will give you guys some updates if I stick with using them for a long enough time that I feel like I can really give you some insight into how they've held up with wear and tear. The other thing I did want to mention is I'm trying some BTL dot skates. These were significantly better value than the other brands of dot skates that I've seen. So, for example, Universal dot skates from Esports Tiger, like Arc Ones, you get 8 dot skates for about $8 shipped if you're in the US. Whereas with these BTL skates, they were $10 for this pack, plus shipping was about $4, so say $14 shipped. But instead of 8 dots, you get 40 of them. So, significantly better value for money in that sense. The other thing that I'll add is I'm pretty sure these are faster than Tiger Arc 1 dots would be. For example, this G305 has Tiger Ice on it, and I know this is a much heavier mouse than the Aria, but if I kind of lift the mouse so it's just lightly gliding on the surface and try to consider how much effort it takes to move, both my ZA12C here and the Fantech Aria, which have the dot skates, feel like the actual skates themselves are creating less resistance to glide with minimal weight pressing into the pad compared to a conventional set of Tiger Ice skates. So again, not sure if that's a really strong conclusion. It's kind of apples to oranges, but I found that these skates also continue to glide quite well, even when I'm pushing down pretty hard on the mouse. They still glide about as well as, say, Corepads on a GPX would with like lighter pressure. So if you were, say, not pushing the mouse into a pad using a G Pro X Superlight with Corepads, and you were comparing it to pushing down hard into the mouse pad with these dot skates, that's more the level of friction that it feels like it has. Anyway, they haven't felt particularly imprecise. They're still easy enough to kind of stop where I want them to. Not quite as easy as the Tiger Ice on that G305, but definitely not bad. And because of how much faster the glide is, then they make something like a lighter mouse like this with very low inertia snappier and easier to use for quick adjustments. So it allows me to exploit the low weight of a mouse like the Aria more efficiently than I could with the stock skates or the Tiger Arc ones that were on this particular copy when I received it. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll just add thank you guys for watching. And if you have any questions about these grips, or if you're curious as to, the details of what comes in the box, that type of thing, then maybe I can answer that as well.